Okay.
That's huge.
All right, we're going to, I apologize for my tardiness. Transactions don't just stop when you leave the office, right? All right, so we're going to call to order the McHenry County Enterprise Zone on May 12th, 2023. In person, we have Larry Smith, we have Nick Ratcliffe, we have Lou Leone, I'm Mark Saladin. So we have a quorum in attendance. So I need a motion to accept telephonic communications with the other two board members, Mark Stricker and Larry O'Connor. Do I have a motion?
So seconded.
Larry, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so then our attendance includes Mark Stricker and Larry O'Connor. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, thank you.
Okay, we had minutes from our last meeting on March 10th. Any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion.
I'll second.
So we'll take Lou, Larry second. Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Oh, aye.
Okay. Is there any members of the public who would like to make comment today?
Yes, I'd like to.
You know what, Mayor, we're gonna get to you as soon as we get to that agenda item, and we'll do it that way.
Perfect.
Thanks. Anybody else have any other matters that are on the agenda? Okay. All right, so now we're at our new business. This is, of course, the review of the zoning administrator RFPs. As you recall, we did instruct the county, and Pete Austin's office was kind enough through his staff to prepare an RFP, which was submitted. We do have one response. So today, I'd like to, review that response, obviously. Talk about it. Charlie Eldridge and I had talked about, him not being in attendance today, so that's why Charlie's not available here today. But, a couple of things that come to mind for me to start with is, you're always encouraged by having an RFP go out, but then, you never know what you're going to get in return. And, we have one response, but of course, the question is, how come we didn't get any other responses, right? What fundamentally could be an issue that we have? Is it the nature of our budget? Is it the nature of our duties? What is it? So that's always in my mind as to, why, we didn't have more robust interest, in this. But Jim McConaughey and Ed Dvorak are here from MCEDC. They're here to answer any questions that you might have regarding this. My intent today is to review that RFP, talk about it. It was not my intent to move to a vote today. I want to hear all comments. I think on our plan, we would have the next meeting, within a month to be able to decipher everything and make a selection at that point. That's just me. So I'm going to open it up. Let's, general comments. I know Mayor Kelly from Harvard, would like to say.
I know one of the things, and sorry, Mayor. One of the things I'd like to say is I know we only had one RFP, but I know I've always, every place I've managed, if I've only gotten one response back, I typically go back out again, just to filter out. Maybe it was bad timing. I'm not sure exactly how it was advertised, but it is a little disappointing to see just one. And I know I, like myself, would like to see us go back out again.
Okay. Anybody else from the board have any comments?
Yeah, I agree with that. We need to do something or something different. I'd like to listen, maybe Peter, the county administrator, could fill us in on how it was put out there, where it was advertised, not advertised. Did we have a dollar amount on it at the time, or?
I don't think we put a dollar amount on it. I think.
You shouldn't have to put a dollar amount on it. I agree entirely with going back out and looking at how it was put up the first time to see. There's an explanation for only getting one response.
Yeah, and I'm not advocating putting a dollar amount on it. I was more interested in how it was advertised and where, and why we only got the one.
I don't think that there was anything extraordinary in terms of how we put this out, it was in the traditional manner. I don't think we paid for any advertising. Often when we have these kinds of things, maybe, whether it's an RFP or a solicitation to serve on a board, something like that, so there's a word of mouth that takes place, and there's people on the board that are maybe soliciting input from others or trying to create interest. I don't know that happened, but I'm confident we didn't pay for any advertising.
So maybe at this time we can cast a bigger net and see what we get.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the struggles that we have is just the budget, right? I mean, our current administrator is doing it for an annual salary, so to speak, but it's a very, low amount, I suppose, if you compare that to other zones. So that's always a question as to, can we attract the talent that would require a higher salary also? And if we have a limited budget, that's always a concern. So, what I'd like to do is certainly entertain any comments that we have from the audience. I know Mayor Kelly's here, so let's list.
I'm just curious, would we consider budgeting some money from the enterprise zone
To advertise?
to advertise, if that's what it takes to get that wider net?
I'm sure we could do that. Yeah.
I mean, if we do that, ILCMA is $50. If we go through IEDC, which would attract economic development professionals, it's probably $50 to post and things like that. So GovHR's, I think
GovHR,
$50 or $100. If that's the route we want to go to repost it.
And there's also the University of Oklahoma's EDC program that we could advertise. They've got alumni out in this area.
Pete, any other comments about just where it was published and?
No. I heard GovHR.
That's it takes money.
Yeah.
Seriously, yeah.
That's a headhunter firm, not really a consultant firm in my experience. And you're looking at $15,000-$20,000 there to hire an executive. I think we should be thoughtful about the geography that we're covering. My understanding is we wanted someone who had some proximity, who could be a local face, who would have the capacity to be a local face, go to chamber events, meet with people, etc. That all suggests that it's a very local advertising, a Northern Illinois focus.
Yeah, and we obviously had some input from Craig Coyle, and his report, indicates kind of the path forward with respect to, looking for that person, which I know we've kind of talked about the dual roles that they have. They have the process part of it, which is important because it's, how the state looks at us and processes its incentives along with each municipality. And we also have kind of the forward-facing marketing type of face, to the zone. I think those can be done easily with one person. I mean, Charlie's obviously been doing it. And I know there's others in this area that already have had expertise, in zone administration, I think Joe Napolitano in Woodstock had formerly been a zone administrator for, I think, somewhere up in the Waukegan, Zion area. I know Jim has been in downstate, has been a zone administrator. So, yeah, I mean, it's finding that right party. And the reason, Jim and his staff are here, obviously, is that he's the one that put in the RFP and filled out the information. It's certainly something that we talked about. So I'd like to also hear from Jim as to, his process, what his thoughts are on doing it. And then let's revisit, where we got to go from there, and then hear any comments that we also have, today. So why don't we start, Jim, why don't you start with respect to, what your vision is. One of the things that I did want to ask you about is kind of the annual salary level or cost level. Obviously, from a budget standpoint, we've got to be careful, with where we're at, and I'm not sure we can fit yet with that second year, but let's listen to.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. So we approached this with a series of questions that we put back to the purchasing director to be able to verify what the characterization of the proposal was looking for. Was it just the administration, or is it the deployment of all the dollars that were associated with the entire budget? And so we wrote this proposal with it in a two-part process, meaning just the administration that you can choose to do, and then pending the board's approval, the marketing strategies that would be behind that. And so in our world, we looked at the entire budget, which we asked for, and we operated off the budget that was submitted to us, and looked at that and broke it into multiple pieces, which is what we considered the human cost or the administrative cost to operate the zone, and then the marketing and other costs that would be D&O insurance, the other pieces of a natural budget. And so we kind of thought of it in terms of there's a fixed cost to operating a zone, and then there's a variable marketing cost that's in that. When we got to the variable marketing cost, we started to digest what we thought would be improvements to the zone and also the maintenance cost of what has been working for the zone. We used some of the consultant notes as a primary driver for us to manage that, which included things like revamping the website. We know we did the website on the first go-around 6.5 years ago, and so we know it's 6.5 years old and it needs to have some triggers in it. We also did a bunch of the social media aspects of this, and we re-looked at what happened 6 years ago and what needed to happen today in order for it to be more progressive. I already go to, or my staff goes to, most of the conferences that were listed on that, so we reduced the conference and meeting expense out and added that back into the marketing aspect of the dollar figures that were associated with this. And then we also noted that in order for us to stay in compliance with the state's new enterprise zone regulatory and legislative process, some bylaws changes would have to be made, some terms would have to be changed. And so we did a deep dive on what those characterizations would be and how to bring those back to the board. Those are outlined in the proposal response. As far as the dollar numbers go, we were looking at a May 1st start, which obviously isn't going to happen. And then that goes to the fiscal year end, and then the next year at 95,000 had what we anticipated to be the escalators that were associated with our current inflationary environment put into that. And it was based as a zero or a neutral biased budget. The same money you spend this year, you'd spend next year in value, with a small increase associated with the cost that we would bear on because of inflationary pressures, around 3.4% or some number like that. As we also looked at the process, we looked at how we could market in the places that I normally go or Ed normally goes. So we would go to where we belong to, the MCEDC belongs to the Greater Chicago Regional Partnership, and we go to those meetings on a bi-monthly basis. We exchange ideas among those areas, and we meet with companies all over the area, the 7-county area that our partnership is in. We also belong to a group called the R1 Partnership, which is the Region 1 Partnership with Winnebago, Boone, and McHenry County. And that partnership also has a separate set of economic development professionals and a whole series of other businesses that we also get associated with. So we talked about how the presence that we have in those two locations could be beneficial to the enterprise zone for those that are expanding in the general marketplace. We looked at also the relationship with the state. We have triggering activities with Intersect Illinois, which is the state's sales and marketing organization, and with the Greater Chicago Partnership and World Business Chicago, which is another driver for the Chicago metropolitan region, and can apply the enterprise zone to the deal flow that's associated with coming out of those areas. So that's as a form of introduction to this. We looked at it in budget entirety, looked at the fixed cost that it would take to be able to operate, then looked at the marketing cost. Pending your approval, we would execute that marketing cost. We looked at our regional relationships and our local relationships, and then we also looked at the partnerships that we have internal to the Chambers of Commerce from Marengo, for Woodstock, and for Harvard, and the relationships we have with the municipalities there as well.
So just going back to like the number you put in the request, the 95,000 starting, year 2, that really encompasses not only administrative fees, but it builds in like marketing costs as well.
Correct.
So it's not necessarily a separate cost just to the EDC. Is that, just so I understand it right?
Yeah, so the $95,000 has $35,000 of marketing baked into it that is being reallocated from some of the travel and meeting expense that normally would have been borne by the enterprise zone in previous budgets, and reallocated to website redevelopment, social media redevelopment, and a series of placard, brochure, collateral materials that haven't been printed in 6 years.
Yeah, and why don't you tell us a little bit about, what governs the MCEDC, so that we all know exactly and what your staff is like these days.
Yeah, so we built some capacity into the staff. I'll take the last question first. Ed Dvorak has joined us now for 4 months, so he's old news. The characterization of Ed is he's running a series of new programs that we have that have been requested by our board and the community that we serve, help support the economy. We also have a data guy on, James Sitko, because data is driving the majority of the activities for new deal development. In other words, where we used to be through the windshield economic development, if you don't win on the data at the very beginning of the deal, they don't even come to your locations and look at your sites. So we know that that is an important element to drive deals in the McHenry County market. Then our board is made up of 17 CEOs from around the region. We have a geographic dispersed element. We also have industry dispersed element. We have a group called EDGE, which is the Economic Development Growth Experts. Those are Chamber of Commerce and all the municipal economic development people, and people of interest like the Workforce Board and the Tourism Board. And we all get those folks together nearly every month, but it could be every other month depending on the topics. And that is our sort of internal push to getting information aggregated and solicited out. We also bring guest speakers in. We've had Pete Austin and Chairman Bueller, and we've had state representatives with state programming coming in so that they get to hear it all at once and sort of curated the information. So that's another group that's been instrumental in our ability to sort of manage economic development throughout the region and create success for ourselves. Final part to the board is the board has a chairman. That our current chairman is Jim Ringness. He's the GM for Shaw Media and the Northwest Herald. The goal of having revolving leadership is to have fresh ideas. Mark Saladin was the chairman a couple of chairmen ago, and so he's got intimate experience with not only what we were, but what we are in this transformative phase of MCEDC. It's a 31-year-old organization. I think it was organized with an intent to improve transportation and infrastructure in the region at a time in which the population growth was going from 160,000 to 350,000 people. So it was a management tool for leadership throughout the region.
And your board is given approval of your entry into this discussion?
Yes, they have.
Yeah. And then the only other question I have before I'll turn it over to everybody else is, with the fact that we've got Marengo as an individual municipality, we have Woodstock as an individual municipality, we got Harvard as an individual municipality, how do you see the interconnection with each municipality? Because, like Woodstock's got an economic development director, and, we as a board have talked about this. Well, who takes the first lead? Are those leads coming into the city, and we're just a processor? Or should those leads be coming in from us and filtering down? So how do you see that relationship?
Yeah, we tried to articulate that in the RFP response in that I started the Harvard Economic Development Program 21 odd years ago or something like that. And that program was designed differently than the way that Marengo and Nick are operating the economic development strategy, and Woodstock has even a different one. So we articulated this in the RFP as we need to have 3 independent meetings and then a collective meeting to sort of share ideas about what the most successful program would be. And as far as the lead generation goes, we do lead generation for those communities, and those communities do lead generation coming back to us. So it's a two-way street. If the community is trying to apply for state or federal funding, we usually run as a primary analyst on the deal flow and then certify the submissions. The flip side of that, though, is if there's local incentives and we're bringing in local activities on those areas, we let the municipality certify it on its own merits, and it goes through their normal processes, which, by the way, all 3 communities have 3 different processes. So again, the RFP tried to address those issues in terms of both collectively coming up with a strategy and then individually marrying the strategies that people want their municipalities to go through.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else have specific questions?
Yeah, so it's the MCEDC, not you particularly. Would there be a lead person that would be in charge of the enterprise zone functions, or?
Ed Dvorak would be the lead. He'd be the guy at the administrative level doing this programming. Although named Sitco is the data guy that would be able to provide a lot of backdrop data for you all to analyze, or we would analyze it and then distribute it to you.
And no offense, this gets back to where we're just like a merger with the enterprise zone and MCEDC, and I thought when we had the roundtable, it was pretty unanimous, but that we were trying to get away from that we were looking for an independent administrator as opposed to, I see this as a merger almost. I don't know how else to picture it unless somebody can tell me different or put it in a different perspective. And I'm pretty sure it was, like I said, pretty unanimous. I don't know, Nick was at the round table or
Yeah.
Mr. Coyle, was that his name? Coyle?
Greg Coyle.
Yeah,
Yep.
Isn't that how you heard it? We're looking for an independent administrator as opposed to something like this?
I think there was a little bit back and forth between the two. I think we're looking for, I can't really say whether we're dead set on just independent or not. I guess, sorry to cut you off. My question is, how would
It's fine.
MCEDC represent the enterprise zone at events? If you have booths, would you have like MCEDC enterprise zone, or is it kind of grouped together for events?
Most of the events that we do in fact are grouped together. We don't supplemental charge. We share a lot of time with naturally McHenry County, our tourism economic development driver that's in the region. We represent the interest at the state level when we go down. So when we introduce ourselves as representing various entities. To Larry's point, we don't see this as a merger at all. We see this as a contract services that you could terminate us at any time for the purposes of finding some better if we weren't up to performance standards. So a merger means you're wedded to me. And what I see it as is we are a performance contract servant that is required to fulfill a certain obligation that this board requests. And if we're not performing to that, you can terminate that agreement.
I would think that the MCEDC would be promoting the enterprise zone like right now. Without this portion of it.
I agree with you, Larry, there.
That seems like that would be part of what you would do.
It is.
you know, without this type of agreement, contract, whatever you want to call it. So you do promote the enterprise zone. What would be the difference in what you do now compared to what you would do moving forward?
Yeah, we don't do your website. We don't do any of your social media platform. We don't do any connectivity to the other enterprise zone activities throughout the state. We don't do any of the marketing that's co-associated with enterprise zone specific advertising, meaning to the local marketplace. We don't advertise the enterprise zone to the existing businesses that are internal to expansion unless we know of the expansion. So we don't try to create greater awareness of the enterprise zone. What we do is use the enterprise zone as a tool anytime we have a recruitment or retention or expansion on a specific project, or if we know a project is potentially going to use enterprise zone type benefits.
Anybody else have any comments or questions for MCDC? I just was looking back at Craig Coyle's summary of our meeting, and you know, there's a provision in here that talks about the zone administrator being unbiased, that he or she could not currently be in a community role in McHenry County, its municipalities, or any entity which currently was involved in economic development. I mean, because I think the problem that we had with our original intergovernmental agreement was this idea of like a three-party, at the original time, two-party head with two administrators, and you know, I don't think that was something that was workable at the time, and that's why we kind of went to one zone administrator, you know, to do that. And of course, Charlie has the kind of this institutional background information that he has regarding the process. Now, you know, it's kind of a quandary. I think the MCDC brings so many positive positions relative to their interconnections with everything, and I think that the process or the administrative part of it can also be handled there. But I also understand the other feelings that are out here relative to that issue. So I'm going to open it up to other comments. Mayor?
Thanks very much. Appreciate the opportunity to speak. The enterprise zone is a huge tool for the city of Harvard, and we see it as being a tool for economic development. I think in and of itself, it is not going to attract new business to Harvard. It's simply an added on sweetener, if you will, to a deal we might put together. In my time in serving in Harvard, our economic development activity was headed by the Harvard Economic Development Corporation, which dissolved last year. And so consequently, we have brought those activities under the umbrella of the city directly. And we have just recently hired Donovan Day to be our economic development director for the city of Harvard. One of the questions that was brought up here was, do the leads start in the enterprise zone, or they start in the individual municipalities? My experience and my understanding in the time that I've served Harvard is very little of that activity came or was generated within the enterprise zone and its advertising. There could be a lot of reasons for that, but I think where we have found leads or opportunities to discuss economic development for new companies coming to Harvard or considering Harvard as a location was generally driven by Charlie, but I don't think he ever led with the enterprise zone benefits. It was more about this is an additional tool within that opportunity that you can utilize. And Harvard has a number of tools available at its disposal, including the enterprise zone, opportunity zone, which is the only one in McHenry County, as well as Federal Trade Zone. There are a number of tools that are available for us to try and attract new business and new corporations. I kind of see, and I think it's a bit of a conundrum about, well, what is the purpose of the EDC and the administrator? Is he going to be your marketing for the entire enterprise zone? Or, you know, as has been pointed out, each of the individual municipalities have kind of had their own economic development criteria or organization, however that structure is in each of those municipalities. And of course, to some degree, we are competing with each other for business. I do believe that a business that might choose Marengo may not necessarily consider Harvard for lots of reasons, and the same for Woodstock. So I kind of see or envision that each of those municipalities would continue to do their economic development efforts in-house and partner with the enterprise zone as that added benefit as attracting business coming in. So when it comes to the administration of the enterprise zone, my personal view on it is it really is an administrative organization that administrates the criteria set out by the state in order to be able to get those benefits, and someone's got to manage that administrative clerical part of the enterprise and ensure that all of the documents that need to be submitted to the state are done, appropriately and in compliance. But I really feel like each of the individual municipalities should take charge of trying to garnish whatever economic development is within the community. And so while I greatly appreciate all the efforts that Charlie has done, and he's a huge resource for the city of Harvard, and we continue to hire him as a consultant to help us in our economic development activities, I always struggled with him being kind of our lead person for economic development, because his focus is split amongst several municipalities, and each one has a different flavor of what they're seeking or what they have to offer. And Charlie did a very good job of doing that, but quite frankly, and I'm a little selfish, and I want someone dedicated to the city of Harvard to try and develop our economic development there, where we are seeking to grow. We've put together some foundations to try and grow our community very aggressively over the next 10 years, and as such, we need someone who is kind of in our corner 100% of the time. And so as this board goes to consider what they're looking for as a new administrator, and the fact that you've only got one respondent isn't really a choice. And I'm not trying to knock down MCEDC, I'm saying that it really, when I put out to get a new community development director, we've got lots of respondents and had an opportunity to interview lots of people and find one who was going to fit with our organization. And I think the MCEDC may make sense to be this person or this entity to administer the enterprise zone, but you don't really have any choices to choose from. And again, I don't know if that's because how it was advertised or what, but it seems like to me as an organization, this board should try to cast your net a bit further and maybe be more aggressive in how you advertise the position, so that you can find someone that is going to kind of meet the goals of each of the individual municipalities and what their visions are for their communities, as well as administer the zone overall.
Could I ask a question, Councilor Mayor?
Sure.
So you have your own economic development guy now?
Yes, Donovan Days just joined our team less than a month ago.
Okay, and you said you had multiple applicants?
We did.
Okay. How did you get multiple applicants, sir?
Administrator, you care to share where we advertised?
As I was saying before, cast the net as wide as possible. We advertised in Wisconsin, we advertised in Illinois, we advertised, we didn't go the GovHR route because that is expensive, but we did ILCMA, the International City Managers Association, because we were specifically focusing more on the community development side. We advertised with the league in both states. We advertised with the league in Iowa, and Indiana. I mean, we cast that net wide to make sure that we had choices.
Do you have any idea what the budget was for that?
Well, you remember, we're looking for an individual
Mhm.
in this case, and I think we spent a grand total of maybe $300.
It was less than 500.
Yeah.
I think that the MCEDC has some great opportunities to mesh with this whole thing, but I would like to hear from some other applicants, and before the day's over, I would make a motion to budget $500 to do that. That's what they say we can do, and we have Alicia here, maybe she could be in charge of that. Is that something that the county would take charge of or not?
Sure. What I'm hearing articulated is recruitment of a full-time person. We sought an RFP for a consultant, like we would any other consultant. I think that was the direction. We're not hiring a staff person. We're looking for a firm of some sort, probably, right? Who can give us that kind of 5-day-a-week, 40-hour presence. Who's there, we were concerned about having, some capacity for time off, sick time, those sorts of things. We wanted somebody there every day. So we were looking at a firm of some sort, not a single individual. Yes, we can try again, but I still think we probably want to go the RFP route rather than hiring a person. Is that what I'm?
And just to add a little there, I think even with going the RFP route, as Nick had mentioned before, you have the IEDC that has a wide network that alumni do connect with, and same with the University of Oklahoma's EDC program or school. And I'm sure there's a couple others that would through the alumni process, you might be able to snag some interest with some firms.
Right. Absolutely. We can try some different tools. I'm thinking as we're talking here, even advertising in ILCMA, you are advertising to people looking for jobs,
Right.
not consulting firms looking for contracts. But I think that's what we need to somehow push into that group of consultants, who have particulars on their Google searches for consulting jobs, contracts, rather than positions.
Yeah, and the reality is we're limited by a budget as well. I mean, I'm looking at our budget, we got $112,500 budgeted for revenue. We're gonna eat all of that up, of which, $42,000 or so is a salary currently. I just don't know if we cast a wider net, someone's gonna say, well, what's the salary requirements? And we're gonna say, what?
Oh, and the same thing happened when we were looking for, and eventually found Donovan. There were a few that, were pie in the sky type salaries. But that comes with the whole search process.
May I interject here? Since each of the municipalities have their own economic development group or person or structure for their individual municipality, what is the purpose of the administrator of the enterprise zone? Is it to do the advertising, marketing, and outreach that we are already doing in each of our individual municipalities? Or is it to administrate and do the clerical portion of the enterprise zone? I think maybe that's where the focus needs to be for this board, is someone to handle the administrative portion of it and partner with each of the community development groups within the municipalities. And then as those leads are developed within each individual municipality, we'll come back to the enterprise zone to have all of the paperwork and forms completed.
Mary, I think that's a good question for this group, because that's,
Because otherwise it's
Not
a
what I-
redundancy that we are already paying for out of our own budgets for people on staff. So,
because if you just want an administrator to do the paperwork, that's a different kind of advertising.
absolutely.
Because I think by Charlie's own admission, there is more that can be done in marketing. He told us as much. I thought the group wanted more collective marketing of the zone and networking. If it is simply a matter of doing the paperwork, that's a different, I didn't think that's what Marengo wanted in joining. I see Garrett has joined us. I thought Woodstock wanted something different. But if it's just a matter of doing the paperwork, that's a different kind of RFP.
I think that's something the board probably needs to discuss a bit further on how do you leverage the amount of funding that you have available with what each of the individual municipalities are already funding internally, and divide up the responsibilities of economic development based on, the enterprise zone is simply a tool and not the driving force of bringing economic development to each community, but a tool. I think maybe the board might reconsider their thoughts on exactly what you want the administrator to do.
Well, and those are discussions that we have had. And as much as we'd like to say that each municipality has its own, there is still some synergy in having the enterprise zone be the one that also says, hey, we're here, right? And if we have that marketing presence, then it's going to benefit all the communities. So there is a balance. I mean, the current administrator, you have to do the paperwork, right? Because that's how the state recognizes us as a zone. That's how they monitor us, and we got to do it right. Otherwise they can say, yeah, we're not going to renew it. So that's an important feature of it. But there was this extra, I think, that I heard from everybody that, yeah, we would like to have the ability to say, here is our website, updated and vibrant, and in the position that can attract other people, that we can then say, we've got a site in Harvard, we've got a site in Marengo, we've got a site in Woodstock. So it's this combination that we're struggling with, and it's difficult because we have 3 independent municipalities in the zone. And the intergovernmental agreement, when it was first created, kind of pointed in this, at that time, dual head.
Yes.
Which I could see as kind of a real competition, and it might have been tough to administer that. So, and that's where Charlie came in, just to give us that stability and that one person, and he was willing to do it at a price that we could afford. Let's say that. So I think our board does have to get into a little bit more of the weeds with respect to that issue. No question about it.
Well, perhaps, Mark, the answer is that you create a committee underneath of the board, which is represented by the economic development directors for each of the municipalities that meet as a group to facilitate that synergy that we're looking for between the 3 groups.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we had the conference with Craig Hoyle, was to get everybody together, including the economic development team of each municipality, to start talking about that issue. Garrett, I see your hand. I'll get to you in a second.
Sure.
And I wrote a note to myself to meet with each mayor, and each team, to start to develop maybe those ideas a little bit more. Garrett, go ahead.
First of all, good morning. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I'm having a hard time hearing half the people in the room there, so. Yeah, so my thought, first of all, I apologize for being, I didn't get a direct cut to the meeting, I had to track it down. But my thought is that there's really two main functions of an administration for the zone, and we've already talked about that. But one is the administration of the project and the paperwork with the state of Illinois that has to go on for each of the projects. And then a separate function would be marketing and trying to attract new business to the zone and other communities that are involved in the zone. So, let me isolate those a little bit. So, first of all, the project management part of it, just simply following all the paperwork, it is something that Charlie's been doing very well. I think it's a fairly tedious process. The main one that's tedious is getting to all of the different contracts, their ELEC paperwork, and having, following up with each of them with to get the paperwork submitted to the state for the annual reports at the end. He and I are probably moving on a lot of this back and forth on a lot of those, but I understand that there's a lot of seriousness to it, and I'm not looking forward to, if it comes down to having the city doing that part of it, I'm not looking forward to add that much more workload onto my current schedule. So for that reason, I would love to be an independent administrator, and I think there is some synergy to be had by having a single administrator that's doing all of that paperwork with the state of the three communities that are involved. There is a fair amount of work there. I think that's where we get value from our membership and the dues that we pay into the enterprise zone through taking that load off of our staff. The other half of it would be marketing. I honestly don't feel like marketing has been accomplished at all in the past couple years. I can't point to a single lead that we've received through our enterprise zone membership. I'm not convinced that that's a critical part of it. I think the enterprise zone itself is a tool that we use with existing projects and with potential new projects. If there was a marketing element, it could be a wonderful new thing, but it would be entirely new. I think there's a lot of visioning, especially if we're looking at for RFP again or anything. I think there's a lot of visioning still to be had from the board, from the member community, of what exactly we want that marketing to look like. Before we go out and ask people to run services, I think that the discussions we have about how much engagement do we need from the enterprise zone on top of what our individual community market efforts are doing, and whether there's really any other independent group that could do it, because I feel strongly that the is probably the only group that would be, because they're already in that role, they could add the enterprise zone scope on top of what they do in a synergistic way, rather than, some group from out of town or even the state that would have to do this whole new learning experience of learning what we represent, how we want to present ourselves, how to understand the types that are available for our community. There's so much looking and uphill to climb for any consultant that came from out of town to do this role, that I really feel like NPDC is the only other entity that could represent all of the communities in that big role without having to do that extra push of learning that might take a long time. We're working with various consultants now that are taking months and months and months to get up to speed on just what our community is before they can give us recommendations. So, but if the market needs to be a strong component of this administration in the future, I think is the place to do it.
Thanks, Garrett. Okay, so I'm hearing possibility of wanting to go back out with maybe some more specific information and a different net to cast. I'm also hearing that maybe we as a board need to dig a little deeper as to what we want, which kind of goes back to each community and the way we came together to begin with and the intergovernmental agreement. So, and that's not to diminish, you know, the MCDC with respect to the work that you put in to date, and maybe that falls on the board relative to our vision that wasn't clearly articulated to get, you know, to our discussion today. So I apologize for the efforts that you guys made, but I think our board needs to do some introspection, you know, on this a little bit deeper. Now, I also know that we have to make a decision, and I want to put a timeline on this, okay? Is there, do you think we have enough information to tell Pete and his staff to redo this in what format? Because Pete needs to know that if that's what we want to do.
It seems to me that we need to make that decision about administrator, marketing, where it's gonna fall. And Mayor Kelly, I think, had a good idea. I'm here because of Route 14 is between Harvard and Woodstock. So,
Yeah, you remember this board by, so.
I mean, I think that the biggest part of this is the municipalities that are involved. The other question I have, I guess, is, am I the only one that did not get what the MCDC submitted?
Oh, I thought it was part of the packet. Sorry, I've got copies here.
Did you not get it?
No.
Oh.
You want to give
And
one? Sorry about that. I thought,
Well, I wasn't sure where we were going with this exactly today, or I would have asked sooner,
Yeah.
or...
No, that's fine.
It was part of the agenda packet.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was.
But if I could interject with Larry, I would like a little bit more direction there. My understanding, we put out an RFP to change the status quo. We wanted something more. And if it is a matter of simple zone administration, we can keep what we're doing.
Excuse me.
yeah, and there's a reality of, you know, Charlie, and I've had discussions with Charlie about this. He understands his age, he understands his mobility, he understands, you know, his health. So he knows that having backups in a process for change is something that we've discussed with him. So Charlie's aware of that, you know. So is there another Charlie in the community that has enterprise zone experience that would do it for $42,000? I'm not sure we'll find that. So that's our dilemma.
Well, keep in mind, we'd have, even if like right now, we were to choose MCEDC, based on their, you know, year two, 95,000, they were, what Jim had mentioned was that they were assuming that they were going to be taking, sorry, let me get on the budget again, a lot of the other items that we had already budgeted, and that like right now, according to this year's budget, would be 85,300. We'd already be 10,000 in the hole and have to figure something out. So there again, we'd have to do our due diligence and make sure.
Right, and obviously with a different synergy, the question is, do we get more projects, more applications, therefore more money in their budget, right? I mean, that's part of it as well.
So what I'm proposing is that we have a meeting in June. That gives us 30 days to have the economic development directors from Woodstock, Harvard, and Marengo to meet and consult, and let's come back with some better direction, rather than just ask you to go straight out for another RFP without, and then we're right back to the same discussion. So that gives us that 30 days.
Yeah, and yeah, we need to do that. But, okay, so timeline, I want to get that discussion done in 30 days. I want to then have direction to Pete. But this is going to delay this process, for another 60, 90 days. Beyond that, just so you know. And but there's got to be a timeline. We've got to come together. Now, I am happy to meet with the individual municipalities. And I'd like to do that with the economic development coordinator and the mayor of each community. If someone else wants to do that with me, that would be great.
I'd be happy to.
Okay. Yeah, all right. So, any other comments or discussion about this? Is that a process that you'd like to see moving forward?
So I just have one additional request. When we wrote this, and we participated with the consultant, with Craig Coyle, in that many of these questions were addressed, and we've got new faces at the table that are now thinking of it differently than the way Craig responded. When the RFP was drafted, my understanding is they used some of those initiatives as the criteria for the request that's on this. So in the event that you are now collectively changing what that consultant agreement was, that's 6 months old or maybe a little older, and changing it, in order to accurately respond to this, we need to have that written up. We need to be able to react to what the true request is, and that has to be collectively represented, not just individually represented that we can then respond to. So I understand that we're going to have to redo something based around a new solution that you're providing, but this original request in the RFP was designed from a consultant's outline of the exact same thing you're talking about today, with maybe some different folks at the table.
Yeah, understood. And again, we appreciate your consideration to do this, obviously. Many benefits, from the EDC standpoint, but also, here in today's discussion, we need to give you that written direction. We need to give it to Pete. Does that sound like a consensus? Everybody in agreement? Larry, O'Connor, Mark?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, we're going to move on. I didn't get any financial reporting this past couple of months from Charlie, so I'll skip that. Just as an administrator's report, Charlie did send me a memo. I'm just going to read some of the highlights here. There's been a number of technical changes in the rules and reporting requirements, which Jim mentioned. Typical General Assembly makes changes almost every year. One of the most important developments with the enterprise zone is the fact that the former Motorola campus in Harvard has been leased to a user. Property has been deeded to a new entity, which he believes is an investment vehicle controlled by CAI Investments, which purchased it at the U.S. Marshals auction last year. He's not confirmed that. The stated value of the transfer is something over $200 million. $208 million. The tenant represents that they have leased the entire campus. Presently, they are working on preparing a small portion of the manufacturing building for occupancy. They have not yet applied for an occupancy permit for any portion of the building, correct?
Yeah. Just a supplement to that is, as you all know, the building's been sitting empty for 20 years. Fire suppression system needs to be overhauled, and that's what they're working on right now. That and some modifications.
But, it's exciting news.
It is.
That there's a user. So that's good. There's an enterprise zone project with a Dunkin' Donuts along US 14 south of downtown Harvard. Several acres of self-storage included in the back, I guess. He said inquiries for retail development by National Change has been very active along US 14 corridor in Harvard. No other results so He's heartened by the number of inquiries for enterprise zone development. Also, in the city of Harvard, it's considering a number of steps to enhance its infrastructure. To promote economic development, it conducted a successful referendum campaign to add a 1% local sales tax to be used for road maintenance and reconstruction. Sounds familiar. Woodstock did that a few years ago when I was on the council. Charlie will be attending the National ICSC show in Las Vegas a week from now. Appreciate any feedback for particular change to approach at the show from municipalities in the enterprise zone. So if anybody's got specific ideas that you want, Charlie's going to be there. Get those to Charlie, and you know, he certainly will discuss those when he's out there. All right. Anything else for the good of our cause today? All right. I'd ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Oh, seconded.
All right, so we'll say Larry, motion, Lou, second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.